Gearing in New World is going to be changing in a huge way, and so is progression, and your gear might be going from looking like this that is currently in the game as of today into something a little bit more like that. Now, it looks a little bit complicated, so this video is to explain the best information as we know it, how the new gearing system will look, and what you will do with it. You'll all be familiar with that item over there. It's just a normal item, nothing crazy. There are a couple of things that are going to be happening to this item though, even in Season 10. It's going to change. First thing that you'll notice is anything that is gear score 700 or above will be able to go to gear score 800. Anything below 700 will not be upgradable with the new Umbral shards. That doesn't mean you should throw away your old gear, because it's going to get upskilled in Outpost Rush, so there might be some use to it there, but probably not worth keeping. Right, the first thing that we know is that the attributes from gear are just going. Magnify's going, 32 Constitution's going, that's just going to get replaced. And it's going to be replaced with a low quality perk. All of the information is in the Night Haven article. Now there are a couple of caveats to that. My interpretation could be wrong, and Amazon Games could have written it in a way where it's interpreted in one way, but they actually do something completely different. However, this is the best we got. For the attribute perk, it literally says, the attribute perks on existing gear have been replaced with other perks of relatively low power, since players will keep the power attribute perks used to yield. Now you might be wondering, how are you keeping them? Well, quite simply, it's going to go to you as you level. It's going to be added to your normal attribute point pool, granted by normal leveling. So if you're level 70, you'll get all of the stuff, all of the attributes, right? And level 70 is the new max level. So that means we at least know the gearing is going to change because it's not going to have an attribute on it. It's now going to have something of a perk of relatively low quality. But that's not necessarily everything. There's information regarding the gem slot. Now, I personally believe that is exactly how the old gear is going to look. But there's a little bit of a question mark about gem slots. Some people think they're going away completely. Some people think they're just not going to be on the new gear. I believe what's going to happen is gems will remain as they currently are for existing gear, but will change on the new gear, and I'll explain why in a moment. But some people believe what might happen is that it'll be replaced with a perk, or even maybe one of the new charm sockets. And I'll explain why, but keep in mind, this actually I think mostly applies to the new gear. And specifically, I think it applies to new gear because it says new gear modding system. I don't think this applies to your old stuff, but it's important to know anyway, so let's go through it. Instead of one customizable gem socket, gear can now have up to 4 empty sockets into which players can install new perk modifiers called charms. The sockets and the charms themselves will have 3 different types: defensive, offensive, and skill. So I take this to mean that new gear is not going to have a gem socket because it says instead of. It doesn't say as well as a gem socket it's going to have this. So I think new gear is not going to have a gem socket. I think old gear will do. I don't think it's going to affect that. Partly because it says new gear, and partly because I think it would just ruin the economy. It would completely mess with the game, right? So I'm not a believer in this. I'm a believer in that. Now let's have a look at the new gear though, because this is where it gets really interesting. So the first thing we know is that this gear can go up to 800. The second thing we know is that it can have up to 4 charm sockets. Now I suspect that'll be tied to the rarity of the item, as in an item that only has 2 sockets may end up being blue. 1 for green, 2 for blue, 3 for purple, 4 for legendary. Perhaps. Now I've used colors here because it more visually represents it. Let's say red could very easily be offensive, blue could be defensive, and green could be skill. I think like Division 2 uses something similar, but you know, it won't necessarily be color based, it'll be type based, and there's 3 different types of socket. So here red represents offensive, blue defensive, green skill, right? But it doesn't really matter. So the socket will be a specific type, and then the actual charm itself will only fit into a specific color slot that is corresponding. You can't put a red charm into a blue socket. That's not going to work, okay? Now I've not put here, but obviously the armor and all that kind of stuff will scale. You can get this gear at 800 gear score. So the gear could absolutely look like that, but it can also be in different combinations. It might not be red, blue, blue, green. It might be blue, blue, green, green. That's going to be the interplay of gearing, is this combination of different slots, the types, and then which charms you want to put in them. The safest thing we know right now is that, but there's a couple of extra things that could get added to this. Some people think a gem socket's going to get added to this. I do not. I think what will actually happen is that basically gems will either be turned into basically like a gem charm. So you might have like a defensive gem charm, which could fit into blue, for example, but an offensive gem charm might fit into red. It could also be that, you know, the faction vendor that has the gem pin setting things, it might be that you can simply turn any slot into a gem socket, or maybe you can turn one charm socket into a gem socket and then the normal gems will go into it. Big debate on that one. People are worried that gems will be useless. I don't think they'll be useless. They'll either be able to go straight into these sockets via a pin setting or something like that, or there'll be a new type of gem that is basically a charm gem, which will go into these sockets. Gems are not going to be completely eliminated from the game. I don't think that makes sense. There's another thing we don't really know is that, can you replace the charm itself but keep the charm? Like, let's say you've already got one in the blue slot. Can I put a new one in it and take the old one out? You'll definitely be able to put a new one in it because that would be daft, right? That's what they're talking about, customizable and all that kind of stuff. But do you get to keep the one that you've already made? You get charms by crafting them, getting endgame materials. We don't know exactly what those materials are, so I'm not going to speculate on it. Now, I think that there's a little bit of an extra element to this, but I'm not sure. Basically, in the dev interview in August on Discord, they spoke about how some items will actually still have an inbuilt perk. Now, I don't know if that's what they mean when they talk about infixes. So infixes, they say some gear is going to have a perk that is built into the item, but they make it sound like it's going to be rare and powerful. And I suspect that could very easily replace one of these sockets. But I'm wondering, every piece of gear might have at least one inbuilt perk. Partly because if you actually count the number of perk slots, the old ones have 5. They had the attributes, they had the gem, and then 3 perks. That's 5. If you look at this, this is just 4. So I kind of believe, and this is speculative on my part, but I believe there might be a new perk, or one of the existing perks, I guess technically, that could just get added to the top of every piece of gear. Complete speculation on my part. We do know infix perks are real, but they might replace one of the charm sockets. I personally think that that might be the case, so that every item gets a normal perk just for balancing reasons. And the infix perks, I think, will refer to, you know, like having keen speed on the boots. So some kind of illegal combination that you can't typically get, like a weapon perk on armor, that kind of thing. So I don't know about that. Complete speculation. What we do know, though, is that gear is also going to have set bonuses. Some of the gear from the raid, the catacombs, and the PvP track are going to have set bonuses. Now, set bonuses are going to work like this, basically. If it's the same set and you have either 2 or 3 pieces, you'll get the first set bonus. And if you have either 4 or 5 pieces, you'll get the second bonus. Now, why do I say 2 or 3 or 4 and 5? That's the combination, right? It's either going to be a set bonus where it's 2 and 4 or 3 and 5. And there's a variety of different combinations you can get. Now, not all gear is going to have set bonuses, but some gear will, and it might be that the set bonuses basically eliminate the need for the inbuilt perk. Quite simply, we don't know that, okay? But I wouldn't be surprised if gearing ends up looking like this, with or without that perk. I simply don't know. Obviously, keep in mind, it might not look like that. It might look like this, or any combination of in between, right? It might be that there's actually 2 inbuilt perks and then 2 slots. We don't really know that. I don't know if they're going to color coordinate or not. That's just me, because I think it's visually more interesting to look at it like that. But yeah, there's some we don't know, but this is conceptually the closest I think we've got. Having read the article now quite a few times, this is the way I see it. I understand that maybe maybe gem sockets will be kept, but to me the phrase instead of means they're going to go away, at least for new gear. I understand that we don't know what will then happen to gems. Will gems just go straight into a defensive slot? Maybe they'll need to be made into a new charm that'll go into whatever corresponding one they have there. Maybe there'll be a gem pin setting so you can give it a normal gem socket. I don't know. By the way, if you're wondering what like the 3 types, defensive will probably be stuff like elemental aversion, but not exactly that. Offensive will be some kind of like damage increase, maybe like Vorpal, increased damage to headshots or something like that. And skill will be the weapon skills, I assume. Contagious upheaval, that kind of jazz. The attribute change, I don't think is really up for interpretation. It's pretty clear. Infix perks, yeah, we don't know exactly what that will mean. I think that means illegal combinations. There is that Discord interview where I said it kind of says that some gear will have a normal perk at least, but will that apply to every gear? I don't know. Umbles means you can increase everything from gear score 700. I think that's going to be bait though, to be honest. I think you'll want the new gear, probably because of the set bonuses. They do say set bonuses are going to be on these ultra rare sets of gear, and you can assume they're going to be pretty strong. With artifacts, I've not done anything with this. I've not been able to modify it or anything. The only thing that we do know is that this will go away, right? There will be no attributes on the gear. I kind of wonder if there'll still be like a plus from some of the artifacts like the old crown and the pants. I'm not sure about that, but let's assume that that's just going to be replaced with a perk of relatively low power. Might not be because it's an artifact. I would assume that artifacts can also go to 800 at least using the umbral system. There might be a new system. Gems could go if gems were going, but I don't think so. I just think the new gear is not going to have gems. Overall, there's a big question mark when it comes to artifacts. When they list the combinations of gear that you might have with various different set bonuses, they don't seem to consider the fact that you might have any artifacts. They are listing it for the full 10 items. Also implies that shields will not actually have any set bonuses, by the way. But they just ignoring artifacts, and in the article they don't really mention it apart from the fact of those infix perks being similar to artifacts. Basically the infix perks are going to be like these, you know, the ones that are actually like unique that other weapons don't have or other items don't have. But yeah, there's a bit of a big question mark regarding artifacts. I kind of feel like they're trying to phase them out a little bit, but they're going to stay in the game and be somewhat usable. But I think you might actually want the set bonuses over them. Not confirmed, just speculation on my part. Overall, I think this new gear system is going to be very interesting. There's a bit of a question mark if attributes are going from gear. What's the point in actually having gear score 800? Well, that'll be the scaling of content. Some like M3s, they do damage based on your gear score. But it will also be the percentage. I've not really shown the armor, but obviously you'll have more armor the higher your gear score. I also think that like perks often do like a percentage. So you can see like Fortify and Perforate, there's 10%. But maybe like at gear score 100, maybe that would only be 1%. So you'll want it for the extra percentage of the perks themselves. But yeah, gear score might be a little bit less relevant because the attributes now don't matter. And ultimately, I think that these set bonuses are going to be so strong that people are going to want them, that even artifacts are going to be a little bit questionable. A lot of the interplay though is going to be trying to find an item that fits the perks that you want. Like if you want to be a tank, maybe you don't want offensive skill. Maybe you just want pure blue, pure defensive. That interplay, I think, is going to be one of the key things with gear. That and the set bonuses. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, as I said, with the caveat here that I could be wrong, but that's my interpretation of the information that Amazon presented. And I'm happy to do this just to visually explain it, because I think some people might have struggled with reading that and understanding what they mean. Hopefully I haven't, and hopefully I'm vaguely right. I kind of like the sound of it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.